You're listening to the DFO Rundown podcast with Frank Seravalli and Jason Gregor on dailyfaceoff.com.
Welcome to episode 23 of the DFO Rundown. I'm Jason Gregor along with Frank Seravalli. Frank, hopefully you can make it through this episode. I just realized, looking at myself on screen, I kind of have a psychedelic shirt, at least on my camera anyway. It's not, it's looking like a little hypnosis potentially for you. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm not loving that one.
Yeah, I don't know what's going. Like it looks way better in person. I don't know what's happening.
How's that possible?
Oh, buddy, it's a sports shirt. There's like hockey sticks and basketballs and soccer.
That is the ultimate dad shirt right there.
Yeah, it does look like, but I got to get a real picture of it because it looks way better than it's looking right now on the screen for sure.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. Oh, trust me, it's legit. Speaking of legit, Sidney Crosby, 16 seasons where he's had a point a game or more. Which of course is third all time. Gordie Howe had 17. Gretzky had 19 of his 20 years. The only year he didn't was his final year in the NHL. You look at Crosby, and that's a record that he'll have a pretty good chance to take a run at.
I think he can get to 20. I do. Look, he's shown no signs of slowing down, and he's been such a big part of what that team has done this year. We have our guest Bob Beers on this week, and we touched on the Penguins at the end with him, and he was saying that team is sneaky good defensively. I was saying earlier at the start of the DFO Rundown, one of the first couple episodes, that I thought the Pittsburgh Penguins, this is the best decor they have. But when you have a guy like Sidney Crosby steering the ship up front, you're always going to be in the mix and have a chance to compete. So for me, his love of the game is what will enable him to get to that 20. And it's amazing to think with all the health problems that he had at the beginning and middle of his career to get to that 20 mark would be an incredible accomplishment.
Yeah, it's pretty unique. And you look at, today's athlete, like we saw Patrick Marleau break the all-time game record played, which is amazing. And I guess when you look at how many players from the last 2 or 3 decades are in now the top 10 and 15, and you just look at the advancements in science and everything, I won't be surprised if somebody pushes Marleau's record in the next 20 years. Like Gordie Howe had that record basically from the time he set it back in 61. So, we're talking 59 years until someone broke it. But I'm not sure I see Marleau's record, and that's not because it's not a great record. I just think you're seeing more guys able to play longer than they ever have before.
Well, and so many of them are starting at 18 and ripping off 82 game seasons right from the jump. Like that's a huge part of it, right? That's why Marleau was able to get there. It's not just the health. I mean, it's incredible. He's now played 900 consecutive games. Like that's nuts in and of itself. Not a single sick day, nothing, no injury that would keep him out of the mix. But I'm just, taking a look at the list here. Who are among the guys that could even challenge? Like Zdeno Chara's at 1,600. He's obviously on the last legs of his career. Then to get to the next active player, it's all the way down at Eric Stahl, 1,284. He's not going to make it anywhere near that long. Like Justin Williams, his career ended at 1,264. Jay Bouwmeester, his career, like you're down in the hundreds. Alex Ovechkin is closing in on 1,200 career games. I don't know. I don't know that record will ever be challenged.
Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see how it goes, but you just, the younger guys play now, and obviously it's going to have to be a top pick for sure, because they're usually the ones who play at 18 or 19. And, maybe there's no lockout, Frank. So there's an 82 game season that Marleau had to miss. And, maybe there won't even be another half lockout. So there's 100 games right there. It's even one less season that a guy has to play to catch him.
That's what's crazy about Marleau is he went through the lockout in 04-05, lost the entire season, the half lockout in 12-13. Then you've got this pandemic year last year that cut off some games, 14 games. And then this year with the shortened year, I mean, he could be well above that.
Yeah, it's like 2 full seasons, really, when you consider it, of games out of his control for a guy who was able to remain healthy the entire time. Speaking of seasons, some talks from the NHL that potentially next year is going to be 84 game regular season, and music to my ears, fewer preseason games, because I've always thought 7 was kind of ridiculous anyway, but 82 makes sense, Frank, if you want to, especially for, having everybody play each other twice, because you're bringing in Seattle. So those 2 extra games from all the Eastern teams will just go to against Seattle. And, those are just extra division games in the Pacific and, in the Central Division. And that it seemingly makes sense. And it's not like we've never had it before, because of course there was 84 games in the mid 90s. My question is, do you think it lasts long-term, or is it just for a few years to try to recoup some financial money here over the next few years?
I'm not even certain it's going to happen, period. I mean, it's in the very beginning, initial stages of conversation. And it's really going to come down to, I think the first question you need to answer is, how do you want your playoffs to look? And I get the rivalry portion of it and keeping things in division play for the first 2 rounds. But I got to tell you, I really think some of the best NHL playoffs we've seen have started with the conference format 1-8. And I think that's the question they have to answer first, because that'll depend on how the schedule works itself out in terms of number of games played, is how you want to structure it.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm probably
you
old
like
school.
the division playoffs?
I like the division. I like you build your teams, that, okay, these are the teams we got to beat come playoff time. You play a lot of the same teams year after year. Now I know in conference play that, like, Edmonton and Dallas, funny enough, had a 6-year run. They played each other. And I was in conference play. So you can make the argument that I guess it can work there too. So I don't either. Either way, it's funny. People complain, oh, these teams are meeting in the first round. I'm like, dude, that happens every year in the history of the NHL. Even if you have conference play, we've had lots of years where the 4th and the 5th of the 3rd and 6th teams were 105-point teams, 104-point teams versus 102-point team. Like, that's never going to change. Just like this year, you look at the 2nd and 3rd matchups in the East, in the Central, in the West, even in the North, Edmonton, Winnipeg, it looks like that's just how it is in the playoffs. There's no crap teams for the most part. So half of the matchups are going to be good ones. So I never really get into the whole, well, if you didn't have this matchup, these two teams, like Boston, Toronto, for instance, well, you go back and say it's conference play, you still would have had good teams. It just wouldn't have been Toronto playing Boston. That's all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think the division play, as good as it is at times, and this year it's been on overload. Like I mentioned a few podcasts ago, that I'm tired of it. I'd like to see some variety, and we all know why that can't be the case this year. I don't know. Maybe I just have a little division fatigue and it's clouding my thinking. But, going back to what you were saying, the number 1 and 2 overall teams meeting in the same division, like that to me is tough. Like, I don't know. I feel like that should at least wait until the 3rd round.
Yeah, it's possible. Like, eventually you've got to meet those teams. And so sometimes I argue that their series might be more entertaining earlier because they're healthier.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's played itself out. I mean, look at those battles that the Caps and Penguins had for a number of years. Like, they were really good.
Oh, Edmonton, Calgary back in the 80s, man. Like Montreal, Boston, like those were awesome. And
how many cups would Calgary have won if they weren't in Edmonton's division in the 80s?
Well, who knows? Because would they been able to beat them in the Cup final? We'll never know, but it would have been fun to watch. Right. But it would have been fun to watch. That's for sure. They were 50% the 2 years they did get out of it. So
yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah. So it would have been great to see. And, so I do like, the one thing I actually like more than anything is I'd rather keep divisions, but then when you get to the Final Four, it's just based on points. So if the 2 best teams happen to be in the East one year and they're seeded 1 and 2, then they get 3 and 4. I would actually be in favor of that.
That's going to be really juicy this year. And I'm fascinated to see which matchups we end up getting. How much does that add to the gruel of these playoffs if you've got some geographically unfriendly teams squaring off in the 3rd round? Like, let's say it's, I don't know, Vegas and Carolina going back and forth or Vegas and Florida. Those are 2 of the furthest teams you can have together meeting in the playoffs, going back and forth in the 3rd round. And then you've got another one for the Cup final. That could add a lot of travel. I like it though.
Yeah. You could look at the 2-3-2 format then if you wanted to, which is not unheard of. We've seen that in the NHL playoffs. You go back to when San Jose upset Detroit a few years in the conference first round, right? Those were 2-3-2 series.
I feel like that never gains any traction though. Anytime it comes up, they like it the way it is.
Yeah. But and that's fair, but I think when all of a sudden you're going to have that much travel in, then you at least have to consider it. And hey, speaking of considerations, have you noticed the Minnesota Wild? Frank just creeping on up, and suddenly the Minnesota Wild are like legit. They could catch Colorado all of a sudden for home ice in that division. Like they're won 8 in a row. They're one of the hottest teams in the NHL. And, their young guys just continue to be the leaders of that team.
I do like the response from Kirill Kaprizov, though. We talked about it in Buy or Sell on Friday, and we talked about Jason Robertson and the season he's had. He's right there with Connor McDavid in even strength points since March 1st. But Kirill Kaprizov was like, oh, wait, you guys are saying that you thought the Calder race was going to be close? Like, here's what I'm going to do to show you that it's not. So that guy we had Bill Guerin on earlier in the season, the Wild GM, and he was just saying what a shot in the arm he's given that entire franchise. He's changed the way that team is viewed around the league because he's such an exciting player and fun player to watch. He's easily the most exciting player in team history, which says a lot because they've been around for 2 decades now. And that team is now right there in the mix with some of the others. And so it just goes to show you one really strong addition to your team in the offseason can change things.
Well, especially a flashy player, a highly skilled offensive guy, which, since Gaborik, I'm not really sure they've had at all in Minnesota. And that makes it a lot of fun. And our guest today, well, let's get to our big guest now, because I want to spend a little extra time with Bob Beers, our big guest, brought to you by jockmkt.com. It's the Jock Market, of course. Go to jockmkt.com. They're a hybrid between the stock market and fantasy sports, and the values of the players change all the time. And Tyler talked about it a few weeks ago. Had you bought low on Verana, you'd have been crushing it when he had the 4-goal game. So go online. You can sign up right now and use the code word DFO20. You'll get a $20 free to start, to play around, figure out how you do. And hey, we're building up to the final few weeks, man. You might want to look at some Minnesota Wild. They're surging, maybe the Pittsburgh Penguins. Get some individuals that you think you can buy low, who you think are really going to ramp it up in the final week. That's jockmkt.com. And now we get to our big guest today, Bob Beers. Well, our guest today played 8 seasons in the National Hockey League, retired, and then actually got brought back as a kind of a Reg Dunlop player coach, was only playing home games of the American League. And now he serves as a radio analyst for the Boston Bruins, one of the hottest teams in the National Hockey League, and one of the greatest names in NHL history. Bob Beers joins us. Bob, welcome to the DFO Rundown. How you doing?
Yeah, happy to be here, guys. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it. It's been an interesting season. It's been an interesting year. Let's put it that way.
Oh, yeah. Geez, how many beers has Bob Beers had in quarantine?
There's a few. They've actually got me doing a vodka commercial on our radio station right now. So having a little fun with the last name and touting Tito's, which is a big sponsor for us.
Oh, awesome. Love
over
Tito's.
The years, Bob, like, did you have teams, or did you ever have a beer company approach you? Because it would have, especially in Boston, it would have seemed like such an easy no-brainer.
Yeah, I guess if I was a little bit more well-known, I don't know if you want to put it that way, or a little bit of a better player, maybe they would have. It would have been perfect with Teddy Bruschi, who was a linebacker for the Patriots, right? Bruschi and Beers, and could have had a lot of fun with that. But no, never had that really. Yeah, like I said, if I was a little bit better player, maybe they would have had me. But I'm enjoying doing the Tito's commercials now.
Oh, I can. Hopefully, you get a few stocks of Tito's at your house. Nothing wrong with that. Let's start. We're going to get into your career in a bit, but let's start current day with the Boston Bruins, who are very active at the trade deadline. They bring in Taylor Hall, a former Hart Trophy winner. You bring in Lazar as an energy guy, and then a defense position well, and Mike Riley. And seems like all three have paid instant dividends for the Bruins.
Yeah, I mean they needed a winger. They've needed a winger for a while. They knew that. David Krejci has been kind of starving for somebody to play alongside him. So Hall comes in and he plays that wing now. Done a nice job since he's been in there. Really, you see Taylor Hall play over the years, but what he's really kind of brought, aside from some of the offense, I mean, he's been dedicated coming back on the defensive side, really hard back checking, things like that. So that's been a big boost, I think, for the Bruins, even though they lost a couple of games here. They're trying to put on that playoff push. But Lazar, energy, as you mentioned, fourth line guy, maybe can play up a little bit from time to time. And Riley was somebody that they identified in terms of a left shot defenseman that they absolutely needed. Somebody can move the puck. And they've had some injuries, bad injuries on that back end that they're trying to kind of get over the hump with right now. And he's fitting nicely.
I'm sure you saw Taylor Hall, Bob, a little bit at the start of the year in Buffalo in the games that you saw him. How different has he looked for you since he's joined the Bruins? Like, it just seemed like even just getting there, putting on a different jersey, just gave him a little bit of a shot in the arm for a guy that admitted he needed some help in the confidence department.
Yeah, and he came right out and said that, with the confidence part. I mean, he was in the car driving to Boston as soon as he got traded. It says a lot. He wanted to be part of the team that night, the next day. But he with the back checking that we've seen, the commitment to kind of try to fit in all over the ice. So it's not just, if he doesn't score, what are you doing to help the team win type of thing? And that's a big one with Bruce Cassidy and the Patrice Bergerons and the Brad Marchands here, that, what are you doing to help the team win when you don't score? And you're not going to score every night. So, and that's been big for Taylor Hall. And I think he's embraced that. At least it looks like it. When you watch him play, some of the back checks he had against Pittsburgh on Sunday, they were obvious. He's really, making a commitment and making an effort to be close to a 200-foot player, with a team that demands it. And I think it's great. I think he's fit in great. Hard for us to know sometimes, we're not around the team. So you're watching it from the outside looking in type of thing. But when you watch him play, he looks like a guy that really wants to be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, speaking of scoring and not scoring, one of the most fascinating parts of this Bruins season has sort of been the up and down of David Pastrnak. And I know Bruce Cassidy touched on it a little bit over the weekend, but what are you seeing when you watch Pasta?
It's funny because I interviewed Bruce Cassidy yesterday. We do it for our pregame show for the radio. And you look down at the stats, and through the month of April, he had 14 points in 14 games going into their game against Pittsburgh, which surprised me because I didn't realize that. But the eye test, right? The scoring really hasn't been there for him. Looks like he's fought the puck a little bit. I think Bruce Cassidy had a comment the other day. It said, take the handcuffs off. So he's had a tough time offensively. And I know that teams will focus on him.
We say tough, by the way. He's still on pace for 35 goals in a normal year. Right. So he's not he's not dying out there, but it definitely, you mentioned the eye test. It looks different. It feels different.
No question. And that's why we asked the question. A couple of reporters asked him that in his Zoom scrum, if that's what we're calling them these days. But he gives honest answers. Bruce Cassidy does, and I think I asked him. The way I went at it was, okay, when you talk with David Pastrnak, what are those conversations like? Where is he at with his own game? And he says he's trying to find it. He's a happy-go-lucky guy. He's the confidence level is pretty high with him, whether he's scoring or not. But no question that the Bruins need him to kind of pick it up a little bit in terms of the goal scoring department.
It's interesting because you mentioned the points, 14 and 15 games, and Pastrnak, we're used to seeing him with like those elite goal scorer goals, right? One-timers, or, he's taking a snapshot and he's beating a goalie clean even when the goalie's set. And so I think sometimes when that's not there, it is funny. And Frank alluded to the 35 goal pace. He's such an elite goal scorer that the bar is set a lot higher now. And so if he's not scoring like Pastrnak or Matthews or Ovechkin type goals, you're like, I wonder what's wrong. And, it ultimately doesn't matter if he scores in April. They want him to score in May and in June. But Bob, you played, and it's rare that a guy can just flip a switch. Or is Pastrnak one of those guys that all he needs is one goal and then he just goes on a tear?
I hope that's the case. He had one the other day against Buffalo. It was kind of cutting across the middle, shot it back against the grain blocker side against the Sabres. He had a couple chances against Pittsburgh. That one-timer that you alluded to from the left wing circle where he can really rip it and beat goaltenders there. But he hasn't had a lot of those this year where we used to see them all the time. And that's Ovechkin's, that's his comfort level. That's his spot where he scores most of his goals. The guys that you just mentioned there with Matthews and Ovechkin, they all kind of score in different ways, right? Ovechkin's got the big one-timer. Matthews is more that drag and that great wrist shot, great release that he has. And Pastrnak kind of does it in some different ways as well, but he does love that left wing circle where he can get shots away from there. Teams have tried to cover him, so he's got to find different ways to get open, whether it's coming up top on the power play or, maybe he even ends up on the right side and trying to make plays there. But he's a good playmaker. I don't think he gets enough credit for that. When teams take away that shot, he kind of looks for Bergeron in a low tip position or somebody else in front of the net. So he's a good player. I think everybody here has confidence in him, but they just love him to get on the scoreboard a little bit more here recently.
You mentioned the addition of Mike Riley on the defense, and they've been decimated by injuries on the blue line. And Brandon Carlo obviously is a huge one. He's gone. Krug and Chara left in the offseason. The position that you play is probably the position maybe you respect and understand and watch probably even closer still now. When you look at the Bruins defense, are they good enough to go deep in the playoffs, or do they need some of those injured guys to be back?
They need Carlo to be back for sure. He's a big part of that. He's a defensive defenseman, really good on the penalty kill. Big guy who can really skate. So, he's going to play 20 minutes a night. He's not going to be offensive per se, but he's going to provide a really good spot on that right side. He's going to help McAvoy, who's, also on the right side, but it kind of slots everybody in the right places. And Kevin Miller's another big one as well. They just got him back, and Kevin's, I don't know what you guys watch the Bruins from the outside, but it's just watching him every night when he's healthy, and it hasn't been very often. He plays the game the right way. He plays hard. He makes people pay the price. He's physical. He'll drop the gloves, protect teammates. He's just, he's a guy's guy, right? And really like the way he plays. So that kind of solidifies that right side. And Riley coming in on the left, Riley, Grzelcyk, they've tried to work Lauzon this year for a full season. He struggled a little bit here recently, coming off of a hand injury. And then Zaborov's he's a first rounder from 2015 that they've tried to incorporate. He played most of the year. Now he's kind of been a healthy scratch here the last few games. So they're trying to figure it out with Riley with Riley added to the lineup.
Bob, how do you size up where this Bruins team fits in the East? Just from the outside looking in, it feels like this year has been a little bit of a roller coaster in Boston. I know the injuries have been there, but it's like it's either feast or famine. Like this team's either rolling along, or it feels like at times the wheels are falling off. How do you think this team stacks up with the other three teams that are going to make the playoffs?
Well, I don't know how much when you look at regular season numbers, I don't know how you guys think about it, but they've got a winning record against Washington. They've got a winning record against Pittsburgh. They've struggled against the Islanders, although they beat them twice last week. So they actually fare pretty well against those teams. Now, whether that translates into playoff hockey, I don't know. That's a whole different animal, right? So, but they've tried to address some of the needs that they had with the 3 additions at the deadline. They'd like to get a little healthier on the back end. Every team would tell you that, or most teams would anyhow, that have struggled a little bit with injuries. Schedule is always a challenge. They're trying to get through this, right? The Rangers are pushing them on the back end, but they could finish anywhere from 1st to 5th. First is probably a little out of the question right now, but they could finish anywhere in that area. And if you're 5th, obviously you're done. And that's the Rangers catching them, but you could also easily catch, Washington, the Islanders, or even Pittsburgh for that matter, because you've got a couple games in hand on them.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Islanders, and in their last 10 games, Matt Barzal doesn't have a goal, and he's only got 5 points. Like the Islanders, they might be the best defensive team in that division, but their offense just doesn't compare to Boston or Pittsburgh or Washington. Do you think in that division, with all the high-end offense that you have, and let's say those 4 teams make it, can the Islanders, can they lock down those teams consecutively? Like you've seen, maybe they struggle a little bit against Boston, but they won the last 2. Washington just beat them 1-0 and then 6-3. Like I wonder, Bob, as a guy who played the game, when you rely so heavily on just being almost perfect defensively, like is that going to wear the Islanders down?
They tried to address their issues, right, with Palmieri and Zajac coming in. Losing Lee was huge. He's such a good player for them. He just epitomizes everything they want, right? Captain, goes to the front of the net, plays a hard, heavy game. They lean on you. They keep you to the outside defensively, like you were saying. Can they score enough? I don't know. They've done it against the Bruins this year. I think the Bruins have now played them 7 times. The Islanders won the first 5. Bruins won this past week, we said, but it's a tough matchup. can the Islanders do it? They proved that they could do it last year, right? You went pretty deep in the playoffs last season. So, I mean, they're counting on it. They've got a good kind of nondescript defense core that kind of keeps teams at bay. They're not, other than Matt Martin and maybe a couple other guys, they're not like a drop the gloves, beat you up type of team, but they're a team that plays physical, tough brand of hockey, and they've bought into it, and good on them. It works for them. So you got some different teams, right? Washington's a little bit different. Built, they don't mind dropping the gloves and kind of getting involved physically in those areas. Pittsburgh's a fast team. The Bruins, I think, are a little bit of a hybrid of those. They can play good defense, but they need to play better defense than they have. Can they score enough? There's always questions with every team, right?
Yeah, for sure. Now, Bob, we'd like to have you on the DFO rundown and talk a little active stuff, but we also like to go back in your career. Of course, you played 4 years NCAA. Then you came into the Bruins, and your career has definitely gone full circle with them. I want to go back to, you growing up and getting, that first NCAA opportunity at Arizona, but you only played there a year and then you transferred. So tell me what happened to go to Arizona for a year and then you're back in Maine.
Well, let's see. I got drafted in 1985, 10th round. There's no 10 rounds anymore. 10th round. So I was what you'd call a project, right? I really didn't have any D1 offers, Division I offers. I had a couple partials. A couple teams wanted me to go to, a couple schools wanted me to go and play a year junior, tier 2 or whatever, and then come and try to join after that. I was ready to go to college. So Northern Arizona University actually was D1 at the time.
Okay.
Division I, and I went there. I had a great year. I had a fun year. I know that, but they canceled their program, and about halfway through the season, they announced that they were canceling their program. They needed to build a new arena, which they never did. They never got back into Division I. So I was able to transfer from Northern Arizona to University of Maine without having to sit out a year, because normally if you transfer, you have to sit out a season. So I was able to transfer without sitting out a year. And I had a pretty good year at Northern Arizona. So there were a number of schools that kind of called me and recruited me at that point in time and wanted me to come. And I got talked into going to University. I want to go to Denver University. And I got talked out of it by my father and by the head coach of University of Maine at the time was Sean Walsh. And it ended up being a great decision because we had some good years at UMaine.
Well, that was the crazy part. I was looking. So you get drafted in the NHL and you still didn't get many D1 offers. Like
that's 10th round. I mean,
yeah, but still, hey, you have a 10th round, but keep in mind, well, there's not a 10th round now. There's also 31 teams, right? So if you look at the 10th round of, 21 guys, there's still about 210, similar to there is now. So
I think that's what I was.
The number of guys drafted is the same, but I'm kind of that because I was looking, I'm like, geez, did Bob, I always wanted to know how a guy gets drafted and then didn't start out. Well, I guess technically they were D1 at the time, but that is odd. And then you go to Maine and like you had some really good teams in Maine. Like you had a lot of your teammates who ended up playing, whether it's 20 games or 500 plus games in the NHL. I think there's like 8 of you.
Oh yeah. No,
Dave Nonis became a GM.
Yeah. Dave Nonis was a GM. Garth Snow was a GM. He was at the tail end. So I was a senior. He was a freshman. Keith Carney had a great career. Eric Weinrich, Jack Capuano ended up being a coach, for the Islanders for years. He's an assistant coach now. Scotty Pellerin's a development coach, I think, for the Toronto Maple Leafs still, if I'm not mistaken. And he was a Hobey Baker winner so yeah, we had some good teams. Scotty was a freshman when I was a senior, but I'm sure I'm missing a few guys. Bobby Corkum.
Yeah.
Really good career. So yeah, we had some guys. We were on the upswing there for a while when I first joined them, and we ended up going to the Frozen Fours or the Final Four 2 years in a row. My junior and senior year, we lost both seasons, but that kind of put University of Maine on the map, so to speak, and they went on to win a national championship with some guy named Paul Correa in '93. He was pretty good. Him and Jimmy Montgomery were pretty good together.
No joke. Bob, how do you size up your NHL career? How would you describe it? Like, I'm just looking at your hockey DB page here, and like you had some really productive years. Obviously, you get a little bit of help with a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning coming into the league. Twice you hit double digits in goals, but you kind of found yourself back in the minors at some point.
Yeah. Well, did you look at the minus The plus minus? Is that listed on HockeyDB?
It's there. There it is. Yep. Yeah. A couple of dashes. So you were in the running for a green jacket every now and again?
That's some power play points. I just prided myself on being able to get shots through and make smart decisions from the point. But, defensively, probably you always look for that balance. And, playing with Tampa, it was an expansion year when I got traded to Tampa. So got an opportunity. Loved it down there. Had a good season. Next season came around and we got off to a rough start. And, Phil Esposito was a guy that liked to make trades. So I got traded to Edmonton. That was a fun conversation with my wife coming home from practice in Tampa and telling her I got traded to Edmonton, which I loved, by the way, but she wasn't so, she was sitting in shorts and air conditioned and, she's, what? We got traded to Edmonton? What's going on? Where is Edmonton? She said. So that was a fun year in Edmonton. We had a good year. We didn't make the playoffs. So then I got picked up by the Islanders as a free agent, but that was the year we got locked out and so it was only half the year. We were in a 7-day training camp in January, and I got hit in the eye with a puck. Ziggy Palffy, in practice, we're teammates in practice. He was trying to clear a puck out, and I got hit in the eye, and I missed the first 20 games of that season. So we sit out half the year, and then I have to miss the first 20 plus games. So it was kind of an ugly year for me. It just nothing worked out. The Islanders didn't make the playoffs. And the following year, I ended up, if you're looking at it, I ended up most of the season in Utah, which might have been the most fun I had in hockey. We had a great year down there. We won in the IHL, the old IHL, we won a Turner Cup.
Well, I wanted to ask you, Bob, I want to start in Edmonton because you came to Edmonton, you got traded for Chris Joseph. It was he's a 5th overall pick, right? For 1st to 10th round. It doesn't matter where you're drafted many years later. And you come to Edmonton, you put up 37 points in 66 games. Like those are some big offensive numbers for a defenseman. And that wasn't an overly deep Edmonton team by any stretch of the imagination offensively. So was it just just a chance where you got tons of opportunities, or is it just, confidence is rolling? Explain to that year. And I think you had Teddy Green and Glenn Sather as your bench bosses that year.
Yeah. Teddy got fired a little bit after I got there, and then Glenn Sather kind of took over. Ronnie Lowe was he was hands-on a lot. Glenn wasn't around as much, but he would be there for the games. Ronnie was always on the ice for practices. I had a fun year that year. The ice, as you guys know, right? The ice in Edmonton, fantastic. People up there were great. Good teammates, good families, and I really enjoyed it. I would have loved to have stayed up there. They made a decision at the end of the year that they were going to move on. So I was a free agent, but playing on a power play with Dougie Wade on one side. You guys remember Freddie Olofsson?
Yeah.
He was my partner. So we were both righties, but we kind of mix and match where we played. Freddie would play up top. I'd play at the top of the left wing circle. When you got Dougie Wade making passes to you, that's pretty good. Jason Arnott, I think that was his first year, rookie, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So and Billy Ranford was outstanding in net. So we had a fun year. Unfortunately, we weren't good enough to make the playoffs. I think they made it either in the year or two after I left. And kind of says something right there, right? So maybe they made the right choice.
Now, for only 2 games, Bob, you had a teammate in Edmonton, and he was a left defenseman.
I know what you're going to
say.
I
don't know if you guys played together or not.
We did.
But there was Darcy Martini and Bob Beers. Were Martini and Beers ever a defense pair?
We were.
Oh we were. That's unreal.
It didn't last long, trust me, but we were.
He only played 2 games, I saw.
Yeah, I think something tells me we played together in St. Louis for a game, but yeah.
Pittsburgh and St. Louis were the 2 teams.
Okay. Yeah, it didn't last long, obviously. So we might have been having those Martini and Beers after the games as well. So maybe that's why it didn't last.
Could you imagine though, as a coach, you're filling out your lineup card. You're like, where do I put this Martini?
That's just a joke,
guy?
Right?
Oh wait, okay. Right here next to Bob Beers. That'll work.
I grew up playing with a guy by the name of Dennis Miller. So we were Miller Beers on the back end in youth hockey.
No, that's fun. So
yeah, we'd have a lot of fun with that name. So, the linesman used to call me Eddie. Do you guys remember a guy by the name of Eddie Beers?
A big
Freddie
four
went
for
to
the
Denver,
Flames.
and he played in Calgary for a while, and I think it's St. Louis. So some of the old time linesmen thought I was Eddie Beers, and they'd always call me Eddie. And I don't know if they were joking with me or they just didn't know who I was. So I went with it. That was fine. Call me anything you want. I'm in the NHL.
So Bob, take us to the end of your career. Like, I'm fascinated reading about and just looking at your page here again. You don't play the 97-98 season and you come out of retirement and play home games only. Like, what kind of arrangement was this?
Yeah, that was fun. That was, so, I mean, when I retired, I was only 29 or 30 years old. And there was some stuff going on at home. So I tried to figure out, whether I wanted to play again or not. And I had a couple two-way contracts available to me. I had the opportunity to work in radio. So I took that, retired, took that. That year was miserable. I wanted to play. I'm watching games. I said, I can play. I still want to be playing here. I'm young enough. I'm in shape. That quickly changed, by the way, the part about being in shape. But I wanted to stay with it. So the following season, after that year that I didn't play any games and just did the radio, Peter Laviolette was the head coach down in Providence, and we had played together. And I called Peter and I said, would you be open to me coming down and practicing and seeing if I could play some games? And he was all for it. They had a really good team, so I was just gonna fill in and because I couldn't be there full time. I said my day job is the radio. I got to do that. This is what my future holds, but I still want to play. And Peter was great. Peter and Billy Armstrong, who's now the GM in Arizona, was the assistant. And they had me down. There was some funny times down there. It was I remember there was one game where I worked the afternoon in Boston. So it was a 1:00 game in Boston. It must have been a Saturday. And then I drove to Lowell, where the Bruins were playing against the Lowell Lock Monsters, and played for them at 7:00, where the Providence Bruins were playing. So I had a doubleheader that day. But that was one of the first games that I played for him. I ended up playing a few games in the playoffs. I broke my hand in the first or second round. Mike Ribera broke my hand, and it was one of his first games playing. And then I didn't play any games until the last game against Rochester, where we ended up winning a Calder Cup. So that was fun, and I did it again the next year. So I played a few more games that next year because the Bruins got knocked out of the playoffs. So I was able to play a bunch of games in the playoffs and didn't get hurt that year. So, and I tried to do it a third year. I started practicing, and Mike O'Connor was a GM and boss. He's like, "No, we can't do this anymore. We got prospects that we need to have play more games. You can't be taking up their ice time." So that was it. That was done.
But safe to say you made the right call, though. Like, how much have you enjoyed the radio?
I've done the radio since 1997. So 24 years, watch my kids grow up, and two of them graduate college, and the third one in college right now. It's been a good career. It's been a good life. You always maybe you regret a few things. Some guys still say they never regret anything. I regret maybe not trying to give it one more push and play a little bit more. But maybe then I don't have a radio job. So 24 years in radio. It's been a great run. It's a good organization. I enjoy working with them, good people. So yeah, I guess in that respect, I stopped thinking about playing and started really concentrating on this, and I've enjoyed it. It's been really good.
Bob, lots of people that I talked to when we said we're having you on say, man, like he always seemed to really enjoy the game. And, listening to you talk about, hey, one of my best years was in Utah. You had Butch Goring as your head coach in Utah in the now defunct IHL, which was, for some of our younger listeners, it was like a rival of the AHL. It was an independent league, and, got lots of really good players that would go to the IHL, and some of them went directly to the NHL. You had affiliations and such. What was it about that year in Utah that was so fun for you?
Well, I'll take you back to training camp that year. And I was in, it was the Islanders training camp. And we were up in Ontario. I'm trying to remember where, London. No, I can't remember right now. We were in Ontario for training camp. Mike Milbury was the coach. So he sent me down partway through training camp. And he said, we have our AHL team is in Worcester, Massachusetts. And he said, so I know you have your family's in Boston, so I'll send you to Worcester. And I looked at him, I said, no, I want to go to Utah. I want to play out in Utah. I looked at their lineup and looked at, Worcester was more of a development league, AHL. But Utah was guys who have been in the NHL that are kind of winding things down, right? We had Scotty Arniel, Andy Brickley. We had Bobby Halkitis ended up out there, Gord Dineen, like a lot of names that spent considerable time in the NHL, and they were kind of winding down their career. And I said, this is where I want to be. So Andy Brickley and I actually lived together out there, and Andy does TV for Nesson for the Bruins. So we remained best friends for years. But that was it was a fun year. Butchie Goring was the head coach. Kevin Cheveldayoff was the assistant coach, assistant GM, guys who have done pretty well for themselves in their careers. And Scott, like I said, Scott Arniel's now assistant coach in the NHL. And it was a good mix of people. Let's put it that way. And we had a fun year, and we had a great battle with Las Vegas throughout the season. Las Vegas finished first overall that year, and we ended up beating them in the playoffs and went on to win the Turner Cup. So I don't know. Sometimes pressure is off a little bit. You're not in the NHL and you're playing, you're having fun. We had 12 guys playing golf during the playoffs. We'd finish practice and go play golf, but we'd come to play and, play hard every night. And it was a good group. It was a good mix. That's why I say it's one of the best seasons.
You also had some, character tough guys. Alan May was on that team, Barry Nykar and Mike McWilliams. So not only could you guys score, if you wanted to get into the rough stuff, Bob, you guys were pretty well suited in that regard.
I remember Mike McWilliams telling me when I first got there, he says, you don't drop the gloves. And he goes, anytime somebody wants to take, I'm coming. He says, I'll take care of things. He's a big man. He lives out in Vancouver now. We see him from time to time when we go out there and travel. But Nykar got traded at the deadline. We picked up a couple of other guys. But yeah, Alan May, I think he does TV now for the Washington Capitals. So yeah, good people. Like I said, it was a good mix. And Butch Goring kind of let us do our thing. He had to come down on us once in a while, but he let us do our thing, and we had fun on and off the ice.
You had a lot of unique coaches, Rick Bowness, Mike Milbury, Terry Crisp in Tampa. We mentioned Slats when he was kind of part-time, maybe head coach as well. And Butch Goring. Of all, were you a guy, did you always get along with your coaches, Bob? Did you have a coach that was like a favorite coach to you that maybe really helped your career, whether it was in college or in the NHL?
Well, college was that was Sean Walsh, and he passed away in the early 2000s, 2001, I think it was. But he was great to me. Really enjoyed playing for him, and just as a person. As a pro, I came in, played for Rick Bowness my rookie year, up in Portland, Maine. That was the Bruins farm team at the time, the American Hockey League at the time. So enjoyed playing for him. And Mike Milbury was the head coach in Boston. And he went from really liking me a lot because I had a good playoff in 1990, and we went to the finals. I broke my leg actually in the conference finals, so I never got the chance to play against Edmonton that year. But and then the next couple of years, he didn't like me as much, and for whatever reason, and you always get screwed as a player, right? So, but you look back on it now, I wasn't quite as good as I needed to be, and then he ended up coaching me again in Long Island and sending me down to Utah. That was the year that I was telling you. At least he sent me to Utah and not Worcester that year. So I do thank him for that. And we've remained friends for years. But he was a really good coach, and things they didn't work out for me in Boston at for whatever reason at that time, young in my career. So I enjoyed him. Terry Crisp was he was a beauty. Anytime I run into guys that I play with in Tampa, Terry Crisp stories always come up. He was behind the bench. He was funny behind the bench, but you didn't like it at the time, but he was hard on guys. And he always say, look, I'm hard on you, but I like you. He says, I'm hard on you. It's just the way it is. And
like, what's a great line you remember?
So a lot of mistakes.
What's one of his great lines you remember?
Oh boy. I guess I can say this. So Roman Hamrlik was a rookie that year. He was 18 years old. And he came around the net and tried to make a pass up the middle of the ice. And I remember Brett Hull for St. Louis. He one-timed that pass past our goaltender. and Crispy, I can't get into everything he said, but he said, Cash, Wayne Cashman was the assistant coach. He said, Cash, the search is over. They've got somebody to play with Hully because he'll put passes on his stick all night long. And Crispy had Brett Hull in Moncton, right, a few years earlier. He didn't like him. He turned into a pretty good scorer. But he's Hammerlick came around the net and he was 18 years old and he didn't understand much English. And
a number 1 overall pick, by the way.
Yeah, right. Exactly. For Tampa, right. Kind of tough year to be walking in as a number 1 pick. And Crispy could be hard on guys. I don't know if Hammer, if he understood what Crispy was saying, but he knew he wasn't being nice to him. I mean, those are the G-rated ones I could tell. There were a lot of R-rated ones I'll probably leave alone.
All right, Bob, we'll get into rapid fire now. And the only rule is you got to answer them as honest as you can. So, well, we'll start with the easy one, Bob. What is Bob Beer's cocktail of choice?
Tito's.
Tito's.
Perfect.
Oh, look at you. Geez, 24 years in the industry, eh? Nothing gets by you. Okay, so now this one. If you could have had any beer company to do a commercial with Bob Beers to promote, which would it be and why?
Bud and Bud Light. That's the big one.
That's what you like?
That's the go-to on the road. Yeah.
Okay. You had a lot of NCAA teammates who made it. Who was the best NCAA teammate you had who didn't make it to the NHL?
Couple guys had a cup of coffee there that were really good. A guy like Mike McHugh or Dave Capuano, had Dave actually might have had more games than me. I'm not sure, but he was a really good college player. He was one of our best offensive guys.
In the NHL, who is the forward that you hated playing against for either skill or just tenacity?
Eisman. Gave me a lot of problems. I mean, I didn't play against him a ton, right? But when we played Detroit, he was always he was just so good. I mean, played against Mario. He was Mario. I remember having a 2-on-1 shorthanded with Curry and Gretzky coming down on me. That was a little scary. So, those guys, I mean, in the pinnacle of their career, I got an opportunity to play against some really good players. I remember Eisman, though. He was relentless. He was always in your face. He
could chirp too, huh?
Yeah, he didn't chirp me much just because I wasn't that important. So he would chirp other guys maybe. I really liked him just as a player. I enjoyed watching him and what he was able to do and accomplish and everything else.
Bob, you've had a chance to watch one, and you played with him briefly, and then for many years you coached him. Zdeno Chara, Ray Bourque. Who is a more popular Bruin amongst the fan base, do you think?
Bourque.
Bourque?
I'm a little biased. I mean, played with him, so and I consider him a friend. He lives in the area. We do charity events and alumni events and things. You can't go wrong with either one of them, right? I mean, they're both. I mean, you got one in the Hall of Fame. The other one's going to be soon to be in the Hall of Fame. Chara was really popular here. He brought a Stanley Cup here, and I think that might bring him to another level. But I'm a little bit biased on Bourque.
That's fair. In the alumni games that you play, do you still want to stick members of the Montreal Canadiens?
And we played them in Gillette Stadium, right? I don't know if you guys remember that for the outdoor game. That was fun. That was a lot of fun. We had some time the night before with some of those guys. I think that a lot of things get kind of buried over years. Some things don't. And there were a couple of guys that really didn't talk to each other a whole lot. I remember sitting in the locker room and remembering that. We had a funny bus ride there, and it was it was just the Bruins were on one bus going to Gillette, and I just remember Bobby Sweeney saying, "Hey, defenseman, just make sure you don't get toe dragged by Kovalev. That's the last thing you want to do is get toe dragged by Kovalev and look silly in front of all these people and on TV or whatever." So I said, I got toe dragged enough in my career. I certainly didn't want him to do that. I kept him on the outside, and he beat Reggie Lemelin with a rocket of a shot. I was like, oh, at least I didn't get toe dragged. I'm -1, but that's okay.
Okay, so what was the most memorable person who toe dragged you in the NHL?
Vladimir Ruzicka.
Oh, big
Remember
Vlad.
Rosie?
Wow.
it was he got traded to the Bruins.
Yeah.
And it was his first practice. And I didn't know this guy at all. He's 6'4", he's huge, and he can fly. And he made me look silly in practice. Oh my God. I think I was in the press box the next game. I would imagine that. Vladdy Ruzicka was unbelievable. He was a really good individual player.
Yeah, he did. Well, you'd heard so many stories about him. It seemed that he came over a little bit too late, maybe.
I think so. He fit in well with the Bruins for a couple of seasons. He had some good years there, but yeah, he got traded. I can't remember who he got traded for. Was it Ranford? He might have been traded for Ranford. I can't remember, but he came to the Bruins and this guy, he could do it all. He was
a highly, highly skilled player. There's no question about it. Bob, we really appreciate your
something
time.
Out of the hat there, but
yeah, no, I like it. I like it a lot. Before we let you go, and thanks for playing rapid fire, quickly, your thoughts, because you saw them yesterday, the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's funny because they got Sidney Crosby and they've got Malkin, who's banged up, but the Penguins have very quietly suddenly kind of surged in that East Division. And, it was a 1-0 game against the Bruins. Are they surprising you? Are they better than you thought they'd be?
They're better defensively than I thought they'd be. They've had, the Bruins had one game where I think it was 7-5, but they've had these other games where the Penguins really check well, and they're not a physical team per se, right? But they check with their feet, they get there, they take away time and space, and that's given the Bruins some problems. Bruins didn't play very well against them. You look at a game, it's 1-0. Did you play well? No. The Penguins say that they played their best, one of their best games, complete games. So it depends on which side you're looking at. But yeah, they surprised me how well they can play defensively. I know that they can score. And it's funny, right? Crosby seems to pick his game up when Malkin's out, and vice versa. Malkin picks his game up when Crosby's out with an injury. And they put it together with the two of them in there. They're scary. So, and Jeff Carter looked pretty good yesterday, I thought. And first time that we've seen him in the Penguins uniform. So a good pickup for them. But yeah, defensively, you always know that they can score a little bit, but really been impressed with the way that they've defended and limited opportunities, at least against the Bruins.
Well, Bob, thanks so much for joining us, and congratulations on coming up on your silver anniversary on the radio with the Boston Bruins, 25 years. That's fantastic. Thanks so much for being on the DFO Rundown. I
appreciate you guys for having me. Hopefully we get a full season in next year and we're back to normal, right?
That'd be awesome.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Bob Beers, some really interesting and fun stories. Like what a career that guy had, all over the map in terms of the NHL, played with some high quality people. And you know what's fun about talking to a guy like Bob Beers, Jason, is you go back and you look at his DB page and you see all the players that he played with, not just the high end guys, but are still making an impact and a dent on the game today in coaching and management roles. Hockey, I always say this, the world's smallest $5 billion industry.
Well, I was looking at his teammates just in Maine, right? So Dave Notice went on to be a GM, but you have Eric Weinrich and, he mentioned Capiano. Bob Corkum had a really good year. And then some young guys that came along when he was seniors, like Maine. It's interesting what he said. They never won the title at that time, but they went to the Frozen Four a few times and really kind of built that organization. And you wonder, if Northern Arizona doesn't have to build a new rink, what kind of career path does Bob have? You never know something like that, because he got to Maine. You usually get better when you play with better teams, and he'd already been drafted, of course. But I do wonder, where his career path might not have gone if they didn't decide to have to build a new arena, which he said they still never done.
Smells like it would have been a good rapid fire question.
Yeah. So, I guess I could have asked him, but that's a tough one. I never want to, hey, where do you think, would your career never have happened if you didn't go there?
I'd be an investment banker right now.
Geez. And how about not many guys, Frank, last 24 years as a radio analyst either. Like Bobby's really good. And you can tell he's got a really good personality, obviously takes himself not very serious, and he understands the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's true. And not only that, but obviously there's been a lot of loyalty both ways between himself and the Bruins and him. And, you could tell when a player has that kind of respect to come back as a part-time home games only, like, could you imagine? That would never work today. Could you imagine telling your team, hey, we're going to bring this guy in, he's only going to play home games? That gives you a pretty good indication of how well liked he was.
Well, hey, they won the title with him the 1 year. The next year he comes back. The Bruins get knocked out in the regular season, so he's playing. But I love that story I'd like to know if there's anyone else who's pulled off the NHL radio analyst and AHL defenseman doubleheader in the same game. I'm going to guess pretty unlikely.
One. Yeah, I don't know anyone that would even fit the qualification.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like that's what's so awesome about that. So I love having guys on like that. He's still in the game, but he's got a great.
By the way,
path.
Martini and beers, like that is fantastic.
Yeah, dude. Like it's they only played 2 games together, but it's still one of the greatest, and I looked and I saw that they played 2 games, but I couldn't tell if they were actually D partners. So that, Bob's we played together for a game in St. Louis, and Darcy Martini only ever played 2 games in the NHL, but his 2 games, Martini plays with beers. Like,
but could you imagine, like,
is amazing.
Slats would have been such an asshole. Like I said, you're making up your lineup card and you don't put Martini and beers together. Like, what's wrong with you?
That'd be great. Frank, that was a fun episode. We will talk to you on Friday. Lots can change between now and Friday. The races, we'll see tonight. Can the Calgary Flames, they got to win tonight to stay in the hunt. There's no question. A loss, they're 6 out with 8 back. But if they win, they're suddenly only 2 points back.
Wake me up when it's playoff time.
All right, Frank, we'll talk to you then.
Thanks for listening to the DFO Rundown with Seravalli and Gregor. Keep it locked on dailyfaceoff.com and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts from to never miss an episode.